Okay, so let's just now have a look at family roles.
Yeah. Now, the reason these family roles are important is because the different people in a child's life, God ordained that they would have a different influence in their life. Men are not the same as women. They have different roles in the family. And God intended for the father and the mother to put certain things in the child's life. Now, it doesn't mean that these roles can't even cross over to some degree,
Yeah.
but because this is what God intended, and these areas sometimes will be missing from a child's life because of the fact that, maybe mum or dad isn't in the home, mum and dad has drug or alcohol problems, mum and dad may have mental illness and just or go to war or have a job that takes you out of town or maybe even sickness lands the children in hospital and the parents aren't there. So the reason these roles are important is that if some of these roles have not been fulfilled, it will give you clues as to where a child may have wounds and damage and hurt. And sometimes they may not know they need to forgive their father or mother for a situation, but they probably do need to. So let's say in the situation of an adopted child. Most children get adopted because a mother gets pregnant outside of marriage, has an unsupportive partner, and they just have had the child, but they haven't been able to keep that child because of their age or whatever reason, and they've had the child adopted. Now, even though that child may be adopted by extremely pleasant, happy, kind, loving parents, as adoptive parents, that child will have abandonment on their life because the true parents have abandoned them. And a child, when you're carrying a child in utero or inside of your stomach, has feelings and emotions, and it gets affected by things that happen to the mother. They know their mother's heartbeat, their mother's voice. So that child at least will have had some emotional input from their mother, and they will have a sense of abandonment when they are given to someone else to bring them up. Now, that may have caused small damage or big damage, but it is very good in that situation to take them through and actually forgive the natural parents. Even if they don't know them and they don't want to know them, it will just release something in their spirit, because we are spiritual beings. We're not just a person who has a soul, which is where we get wounded in the emotions. We are a person who can be wounded in the spirit because we are spiritual beings as well as physical beings. So that's why it's important to actually understand these roles, because sometimes it may give you clues to various things. So another situation might be, say, parents get divorced. Well, that will make whoever parent they're not brought up with, those roles will be in very short supply to that child. Right, so these are the father's roles. And usually it's often the father that's out of the home. Not always, but quite often in those divorce or situations, the father won't be in the home, and these things will get damaged. Now, the father is the leader, the spiritual leader of that family. If he's not providing the leadership, the children don't learn leadership skills. They aren't led, and they feel lost. A father will give a child their identity. So if a father is a very loving father and tells a child that you're a really amazing son, you're a gorgeous young daughter, that will give them a real sense of who they are. But most people that will be coming to you probably won't have that. They will have things like being told they're a waste of time, or their father, just by not being there, will tell them that says to a child, you're not important to me. A father who never spends any time with their children will have a sense of that loss of identity, that they are important, that they are lovable. So this is why you'll find most people who come with problems will have damaged father images and will have suffered the consequences. So always when you're if you're not sure where to start with the dad. Because he will be very critical. But he has other roles as well. A father will launch them into their adulthood. So a father not being in the home, they won't have that sense that they have a destiny and a purpose.
Yeah, I remember one young man we ministered to, his father had said, you'll never amount to anything.
That's not good.
And he didn't. he became what his father said. He
Yeah.
became an alcoholic.
Yeah.
Never amounted to anything, but it was when he actually forgave his father that he was able to get free of that and have know that he, in Jesus and his heavenly Father, he'd have a purpose and a destiny in his life.
That's it. And that's what a father is to do, is to give that purpose and destiny to a child. Now, the other thing a father is to do is to protect his child. Now, sometimes the father is actually physically damaging and wounding their child. That is the total opposite of that protective role. But even if the father isn't in the family, and this often happens that a stepfather comes in, and sometimes I'm not saying all stepfathers, but sometimes a stepfather may take sexual advantage of a child or physically abuse them or something like that. Well, then the father, who should have been there to protect them, isn't there to protect them from that abuse. And so they will have to forgive not only their stepfather for abusing them, but they'll have to forgive their father for not being there to protect them. So this is why you must understand these roles. And a father is there to provide. Now, many fathers, when there's a marriage breakup, stop supplying financially provision to their children, and then their children suffer because they don't have that provision that they need. Or the mother has to be at work all the time and she can't then do her roles as well because she's not there in the home to do them, and she's trying to play both fathers and mothers' roles. Now, obviously, mothers can make mistakes too, but these things do affect a child, and a child might need to forgive their father for really not providing for them in the financial way.
We've seen ministered to a drug addict where both the parents had been drug addicts and were just not really there at all. They were certainly not providing in any way, shape or form. And the child had siblings and virtually had to become the parents had to become like the father and the mother to those younger children. And that creates massive woundings and damage in the hearts of children.
It does. So that's something to look out for. You know, this is why you need to have some idea about the background of that family and get them to tell you the story, because it will give you hints on what may need to be actually forgiven.
That's right.
So that's the father's roles, but a mother's roles have a different side of that. The mother was designed to, to a very young child, their roles are very, very important. Father's roles are very important too, but mother's role is very much for a small child. So a mother's role is to be a nurturer. Now, if a child is born prematurely and is in hospital for a very long time and the mother's not able to provide the nurture that normally would happen, the skin-to-skin contact that a mother would normally have, cradling the baby, speaking sweet things to that child and doing those type of things, then that child is going to miss out on feeling the sense of that they are just lovable. And, certainly if a mother dies in childbirth, well, obviously they are really going to miss that out. And, children that are chronically sick often miss out on that role too, just because they're in hospital for a long time. So these things are quite important, and they may need to forgive their mum for not being there, even though it doesn't mean that the mum intended not to be there. Like even a parent dying, there's a loss. And of course, obviously that parent didn't intend that, but the loss is there, and they probably still need to forgive that parent for not being there, even when it was out of their hands. So the mother's other job is to teach and train her child. Well, obviously, if a mother has mental illness or drug and alcohol problems and just is leaving the kids to bring up themselves, which happens a lot, doesn't it, Ian? Well, then she's not going to be teaching them and training them in the right areas and giving them the self-confidence that they need to actually develop into a healthy adult. And then a mother is there to comfort the children. It's a mother's role to give them comfort when things come against them. But we find the most damage that people have is often when the people that are actually hurting them and wounding them are actually their parents. That is like the worst case scenario. Being absent is bad, but actually being the one that actually is causing the problems.
The violence in the home.
Yeah, the violence in the home and the abuse and and the neglect and the words of coming out of your mouth or out of a parent's mouth to say you're a waste of time or I hate you or whatever, those sort of things, it's the parents that can cause the biggest amount of damage.
That's right.
And they are definitely the critical area. So we find that let's say someone comes to you and they got issues with their husband and they download all the things about their husband to you, they tell you all their complaints. Often when you start getting back to things, basically you'll find that it's actually they have a problem with their father or their mother, and that's where these issues have stemmed from.
The root causes,
the roots will be back with the parents or the lack of them. And if it's not the parents, it'll be the grandparents because the grandparents have had to bring up the children.
Some significant authority figure in their lives. Yeah.
Which is why on that next part we get you to ask about those things before you start. And of course then we have siblings.
Yeah.
And siblings are our brothers and sisters. And, with broken families, you have stepbrothers, stepsisters. It can get very complicated. Now, if they've never actually lived in the home with the child, it may not be so critical. But sometimes older siblings will actually be like a mother or father and raise the child. And sometimes siblings, not having any siblings can be a problem too, because they don't have the friendship and just someone to share life with. They don't get those life skills. So a sibling's role is to provide friendship and support. But some siblings can be abusive to their other siblings. They can say nasty and wounding things. I think that happens to all children to some degree. But there's sometimes there is sexual abuse and there's violent abuse and there's all sorts of other things that can go on. And so this is why you need to find out what siblings were in the home when they were brought up. So this is why we want you to just think about these family roles. So it just gives you wisdom and insight sometimes on what parts of the forgiveness prayer or who they need to forgive. It will help you get to those root causes.
Yeah.